on Tuesday the 13th, 2024. I am Councillor Tim Bowen and I will be chairing today's meeting. Just to make you all aware, this meeting will be recorded. Can I welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not to speak or participate? Please ensure your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Members, if you wish to speak or ask a question, please raise your electronic hand on Teams or physical hand in person. Moving on, agenda item 1, Chair's announcements. I have no announcements to confirm. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations?
I see no hands, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 3, minutes of previous meeting. Minutes from the meeting held on 23rd of July 2024 are attached on pages 5 and 6 of the agenda pack for approval. Members, do you have any comments to make on the accuracy of these minutes? Please can I have a proposer and seconder to approve the minutes, and any abstentions, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Ros. If you do not raise your hand to the contrary, I will assume you are in favour of approving the minutes.
I see no indications to the contrary, Chair, so those minutes have been approved.
Thank you, Tammy. Agenda item 4, to request site visits from the applications presented. The application before us today has already been subject to a site visit. But do any members wish to request a second site visit on the application or on any other matter?
I see no hands, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Please also let me know if you wish to call a site visit at any point in the meeting. Agenda item 5, application number P2023/0101 McDonald's Restaurant Limited, Alchwen. Now we move on to section A of the agenda, which is matters for decision. The only application before us today is application number P2023/0101 McDonald's Restaurant Limited, Alchwen, Pontardawe. The report is set out on pages 7 to 44, and this application is recommended for approval. The confirming site visit in regard to the application was undertaken on Monday, the 5th of August 2024, as agreed in the last meeting of the committee. I would now like to ask the planning officer to take us through the report. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. As stated, this is planning application P2023/0101 for a freestanding drive-through restaurant, car parking, landscaping, and associated works, including customer order displays and playframe at Tesco's car park, Gwynts Place, Alchwen, Pontardawe. The applicant is McDonald's Restaurant. This is a full application within the ward of Alchwen. You see before you an image of the site location. The site is edged in red. You can see identified on there various of the main highways in the area. The main one being the A4067, which runs from Swansea through to Senny Bridge in Brecon. So this is the proposed application site. You'll see the application site edged in red. Tesco's to the right of the plan, the existing Tesco's store, and to the left of the plan, the roundabout, which provides access to Pontardawe and off the A467. The petrol filling station off the roundabout, and the access into the existing store. This is just an aerial image that we've put in just to give you again an indication of the layout. You've got the Tesco store down in this area here at the bottom of the plan. You've got the petrol filling station and the roundabout there at the top corner. And you can see the area where the application site is going to go, where my arrow is now, which is at the top end of the car park. We've got some images now which should be familiar to following the site visit. So this is the view from the entrance into the site. You can see the footbridge that goes over to Alchwen over the dual carriageway located on the left-hand side. The site there in the distance to the centre, just behind where our car is coming out the entrance. the entrance road, the service road running down on the right-hand side, which goes down to the service area at the rear of Tesco's, and you can see the beacons there either side of the pedestrian crossing that crosses that road over to the footbridge that crosses the river. Again, a view of the entrance road in. So the petrol filling station is to the left-hand side of that image, the Tesco's store to the right, and at the top of the rise there, just in front of the footbridge that you see over to Archdwen, is a mini roundabout that provides access to both of those areas. So this is obviously where we stood for the majority of the conversation on site. This site is in front of you, and beyond that, you can see the existing Tesco store in the distance. This again is from the opposite side of the pedestrian crossing by the footbridge at Archdwen, where we stood and walked round. So this will be familiar to the this is where the works to the active travel improvement route will be undertaken, widening the existing footway to 3.2 metres. The site then in front of you will comprise the proposed drive-through restaurant and its car park. So this is a plan showing the proposed layout. You've got the store there as the grey box, the car parking area for the store, which will have EV parking and cycle parking. The drive-through area there to the top right-hand corner, just off the roundabout. So access comes in off the existing car park to provide access for the car parking and also for the drive-through. You can see the existing pedestrian crossing that's located to cross over to the footbridge going over to Archdwen. And then on the other side, you can see the existing pedestrian crossing that crosses over. And again, the footbridge that crosses over the river. These are the proposed tracking plans, and I'll pass over to Justin later in my presentation to give you a bit more detail on the highways. So this is obviously the tracking plans for the smaller servicing vehicles. And this is the tracking plan for the HGV. You can see there located at the side of the site, the existing lay-by that we pointed out on site that would accommodate that. And as you note from the report, there's a delivery management plan for dealing with that. So the deliveries will be taken off the back of that lorry. I think there's only one possibly every few months of that size. The majority of them are smaller vehicles that will be accommodated within the site. They're taken off by trolleys, and then there's a pedestrian crossing that takes you straight across into the site there for them to pull the trolleys in. And obviously we've got the delivery management plan in relation to dealing with the health and safety aspects of that. Again, an image of the existing pedestrian crossing that crosses over to the footbridge over onto Archdwen at the top side of the site, and that's the road that goes in towards the Tesco store and the car park. The footbridge going over to Archdwen with the dual carriageway between this site and Archdwen. And again, a couple of images of the service road that we've got on the lower side. So as you can see, the active travel route would follow around the edge of the site, down towards the beacon that you see there and across the crossing. That footway, as stated, will be widened to 3.2 metres to a combined footway and cycleway. You will note the view down the service road, and you can obviously see the changes in levels there between the existing car park increases as you go towards Tesco's with the existing crib retaining wall. And there's a view back towards the entrance of the site. So the crossing will the combined footway will go to one side of the crossing, and then you've got the crossing point and the footway down then, which goes onto the ramp to cross over onto the over the river. And again, that's the view of the crossing over the river. And the if you notice on this one, you can see the lay-by that the HGV was used to access the site, and then they'd be able to go across, take the deliveries across into the store through their drive-through area. We've got a couple of images of the building itself. So it's a pretty standard design in terms of a McDonald's store. And the floor plans. And then some images there of what typical the drive-through stand-ups look like. the other street furniture and associated outdoor seating, cycle store, other street furniture within the site, and a typical elevation of the play equipment that's going to be proposed. I'm going to stop sharing a second. So just to run through, obviously all members have seen the report, but just to run through a number of the issues within it just for clarity. So in terms of the principle of development, the site lies within settlement limits alongside the A467, which, as I stated, runs surprisingly all the way from Swansea all the way through to Sennybridge in Brecon. It's been an established retail location since approximately 2004 with a food store and petrol filling station, noting that originally planning was granted in 2003 that included an A3 restaurant drive-through. Obviously, that was never developed, and a subsequent application in 2004 for the store and a reconfigured petrol filling station was then brought forward. Within the report, it addresses the town centre first principle as set out within Future Wales, and the sequential test for obviously locating a use that may be more appropriate within a town centre. The authority cannot consider a disaggregation of these uses. So that would mean that you can't consider, we can only consider the application put forward in front of us. We cannot consider that they can put a restaurant somewhere else and a drive-through in another location. You've got to look at where they could find a site for the use that they propose to build. So in terms of that, sequentially, this appears a more sustainable location than other sites that could potentially be looked at. It's got what we consider good pedestrian and cycling access links to the town centre, and those were put in predominantly through the development of the Tesco store. Other sites would potentially be less sustainable and or allocated for alternative uses. So, for example, there is a site at the rear of the little store that is actually allocated for housing. And then I think the applicants also looked at Glanreed Industrial Estate, which has also come up in some of the suggestions in the objections we've received. But obviously that's a much less sustainable location, being more difficult to access for pedestrians and cyclists in relation to and in proximity to the town centre. In relation to highways, initial information submitted needed to be amended, and those amended details included additional survey data, and highway obviously now offer no objection in respect of highway capacity or highway and pedestrian safety, subject to conditions obviously are set out within the report. Deliveries will be undertaken predominantly in vehicles can enter and leave the site itself, and on the rare occasion when a HGV were to visit the site, a delivery management plan is proposed that would be conditioned as part of any approval. There will be an overall reduction in car parking available on the site. However, surveys that have been provided have found a surplus of car parking, noting that standards have changed from minimum to maximum car parking standards since the time of the original site approval, to obviously encourage more active and sustainable travel use by customers. If I can bring in my colleague, Justin Griffiths from the highway section then, he's going to just give you a very quick overview in terms of the technicalities, in terms of the survey data and the evidence being provided. Justin?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues and members. I'm just going to split the discussion this morning in terms of on-site surveys in relation to parking and the surveys that were also undertaken for the actual transport impact assessment. Now, we'll focus on the outside of the site at the moment, which includes a transport impact survey being undertaken for both roundabouts, which are the A4067 and also the A474 roundabouts. The applicant has used a transport impact assessment, which realistically simulates the balance of highway capacity and traffic demand, providing a significant benefit to the modelling. So it looks at it more the intricacies in terms of how the traffic and how culture performs, I suppose, on each sort of roundabout. So that they've done a survey as well, which was undertaken within a neutral month. Neutral months consist of the months of April, May, June, September and October. And these months are recommended by what we call Design Manual for Bridges standards, which is the go-to specification and guidance for all, I suppose, strategic development and highways alike. So it's a bit like our specification when we look at all highways and other documents as well that we refer to for approving such applications that come through. So it provides significant benefit, the modelling in which they've done, unlike the standard transit modelling. So basically, the surveys that were undertaken were on the 15th of May through to the 21st, and that was over a 7-day period. And the surveys were undertaken on the main access, the petrol station and Tesco's car park of all of the traffic coming in and out of those areas. And what was found is that in terms of delays on the approach to the access leaving Tesco's, for example, at AM, which is in the morning, it went from it was an average increase of 5 seconds. So it was originally, say, on a peak and average of, say, 8 seconds, but it's this, with development, we'll add in an extra 5 seconds delay, which is well within tolerance in terms of the level of service. Peak times, then, you're looking at an additional 1 second in terms of the actual capacity and queuing time. We're talking seconds. There's probably a few cars would have passed just when we talking over the last couple of minutes that I've been speaking. And then Saturday midday, you're looking at an average increase of 3 seconds as well. So as you could see, they've done quite an intense, sort of survey on all of the areas, including the outside and coming into the site as well in terms of the roundabouts there. Going off then onto the car parking, as Chris mentioned earlier, the car parking has been underused, to say the least. And what we have found in terms of the survey that was undertaken is, I'll just find my documents a second, bear with me. So on that one. Yeah, so we done the survey of the car parking was done around about the same time. On a Monday, we looked at the total occupancy for a Monday was only 34% of the car park was used, leaving spaces of 270. On the 15th of May, that was. 16th of May, you're looking at 35% was only used, leaving a spare capacity of 267 spaces. Wednesday, you're looking at nearly 40%. It was 39% they were showing, leaving a spare capacity of 251. Thursday, leaving a spare capacity of 271. And then Friday, which was the most capacity-wise, which was still left unused, was 302. So on a weekday average, you're looking at 270 spaces on average, which are not used within the car parking area. And also, just for the purpose of this discussion this morning, the 410 spaces would have been approved back in 2003 when the Tesco's car parking area was in situ, and it would have been included in the transport impact assessment at the time. So therefore the highway network and the county roads should have and would have been able to cope with that modelling during that time. And as we just explained to you, the car park is well underused, and therefore, based upon the surveys for within the site within car parking and the transport impact assessment that was undertaken for the county roads, we offer no objection, highway objection, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chris.
Now, thank you, Justin. If you could just do one point of clarity for me, please. Could you explain to members, I know you did on a site visit, but just for the record of the planning committee, what you mean by a neutral month?
Yes, of course. Forgive me. Yes, I did have that written down as well, but I didn't cover that. I apologise. A neutral month is recommended, as I said, by the DMRB standards. But a neutral month is basically a survey which we put in place where all facilities, including schools and other facilities in the area, are fully operational. So we're not, and that discounts as well bank holidays as well. So what we need to look at is what it's going to look like in real time when we are at our full capacity, when the schools are fully operational. The shops are all open. There are other facilities in Pontardawe, for example, that are continuing to be open, and people going to work on the daily routines as well for AM and PM peaks and intermittent peaks. So those months are classed as suitable months, really, by the DMRB standards going forward for us as a local authority, and for every other local authority for that matter, to use then to say to applicants that those are the months that you should be looking at to undertake these surveys. Hopefully that has made it clear for members, but I'm open to discuss and answer any questions later on. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Justin. So to continue, in terms of active travel, the applicants are providing a 3.2 metre combined footway and cycleway around the perimeter of the site that connects both crossings from the footbridges, as mentioned before. This will also connect to the national cycle route that runs along the river itself. The site provides EV charging and cycle parking within the site. The active travel route is also identified as a safe route to schools. As members are aware, there are no policies currently within the local development plan that restrict development on such a route, nor in proximity to a school. Education, and this, please take this data as very rough data because it's just based on a snapshot in time, and obviously schools change. Currently, there are approximately 1,115 pupils within the secondary school on the opposite side of the river, and approximately 250 of those pupils came from primary schools within Actwen or Rose that could potentially be coming from that direction, so utilising that route. The authority has no definitive data on the use of that route. They have some data on the use of the cycle route, but obviously that's going in the opposite, going in a different direction. And some of those 250 pupils may arrive by bus or car and other means. So, but there's no definitive data that the local authority holds on the use of that route. In terms of health and well-being, whilst this can be a material consideration, the determination of an application, the proposals in the view of the officers would not result in a significant impact over that and above of similar uses in the area. There are no policies as stated within the development plan that would preclude such a use within proximity to an active travel route or a safer route to school, or in proximity to a school. In terms of ecology, the site is predominantly a hard surface car park currently, and through natural drainage features and landscaping, the application achieves biodiversity net gain through incorporating rain gardens and flower planting within its landscaping, so it's a significant betterment in terms of the existing position. And again, these things are controlled by condition. In touching on amenity issues and antisocial behaviour, the report concludes the proposed development will provide an acceptable layout and design for this location. The car park is currently open 24 hours and there are no restrictions to access into that area currently. The use is proposed to operate between 7 AM and 11 PM for the restaurant, with the current condition allowing the drive-through element to be operating for 24 hours. There are no restrictions in place currently, as far as we're aware, on the petrol and filling station or the Tesco store that would prevent them also opening 24 hours. In relation to litter, there is a proposed condition that ensures that appropriate refuse storage and customer waste bins are provided as part of a scheme to be submitted. Workplace recycling rules and food recycling requirements are obviously all already in place, controlled by other legislation. Members may be aware of the extended producer pays responsibility legislation that is currently going through via central government that incentivises businesses to reduce packaging and potentially be taxed on money that could be recycled between local authorities to deal with waste. However, that is yet to come into force, and I believe it's not coming into force for a number of years. However, it just shows that obviously whilst we can control in terms of refuse recycling on the site and provision of that on the site, it shows how other powers and legislation are in place and things are moving in a certain direction regarding recycling and waste that lie outside of planning control. We've had a request to consider whether or not any refuse cycling any refuse bins may be able to be located outside of the application site, like either side of the footbridges, for example. Obviously, that's a little bit complicated in terms of any street furniture that may or may not impact on the active travel route in terms of its width. and also land ownership, and then obviously cost in terms of emptying those bins as and when. So we're happy to place a note on the permission that would reflect the existing condition that we've got for the applicants to consider whether or not there's opportunity in discussion with our waste colleagues, because obviously there's a potential cost implication of the authority if we've got to go into the site to empty those bins ourselves. But we're happy to put a note on the condition in relation to that, because obviously the notes aren't within the report as you see it today. In conclusion, the application is therefore recommended approval subject to the conditions in the report and based on the policies as set out within the report, within the local development plan and all of the national planning policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Justin, for that report. Before we move on, do any other officers have anything they'd like to add? No. Thank you. Right, we have one registered speaker for this item. You will have 5 minutes to address the committee. Democratic Services will be timing you and will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time has ended. Can I please call on Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please? Tammy, to confirm when the timer has started.
Thank you. Councillor Reynolds, you can begin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the councillor for Gwanca Gerwin and Lower Brenham, or one of the two. I'm not a member of the planning committee. I'm concerned mostly in this about the impact on the community in the Upper Ammon Valley, but all of our communities around. I agree with the ward member in that there is, and as I have limited time, I agree with the objections that have been put forward by her. I wanted to focus on litter and highways issue and on health and well-being. In terms of litter, we have an indication in the application there will be picking near the facility. However, that doesn't cover the droppage that we already see and that we suspect and know will increase given this application from people who are driving up our valleys coming away from the site. That will impact on our situation. The Ammon Valley has fought hard to clean itself up. We note that McDonald's are looking at identification in the longer term. I would like to see that made a condition if this is approved. I think we should be doing that and making sure that they pay. The highways and transport issue is one of the bus stop, where it is indicated in the application that it will be used for deliveries. We are looking in the Ammon Valley now, because we have limited transport, to bring back a bus that would wish to use that stop and had planned to. That will be a problem. Can I then move to health and well-being, which is the main issue? I have a background in scientific research and moved on into educational research and development. I've been looking most recently for my own information and in terms of this at the impact of ultra-processed foods. I have real concerns, as does the Scientific Advisory Committee of the UK government, who have undertaken scientific reviews in this area. They show detrimental impact on weight and obesity in all age groups, on chronic disease and the impact on long-term health of our communities, mental health of all kinds, including anxiety, which is a problem for our young people and in general in our community, and in maternal and gestational health issues, which impact on future generations. We are looking at putting this development directly in the path of young people moving to and from the secondary school. I talked to parents in the Upper Ammon Valley, 50-50 they were initially about, oh yes, a McDonald's, yeah, it's enticing. It's interesting to people. They like the flavour, they like the use. When I said where it was going to be, they said, oh God, the kids will be there every day. 100% said no, can't happen, shouldn't happen. The health and well-being of these children and on our future generations, because it's about their gestational health, about them as parents and being able to parent the next generation, is going to be impacted by this. So we can use the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which states that we have a duty to take reasonable steps in exercising our functions to meet sustainable development and wellbeing objectives. We are looking at a development that could be massively detrimental on the future population of our area. Yeah. We also have the placemaking, people and communities section, which talks about impacts on health and well-being. It is my clear belief, and whilst I'm not qualified to comment on planning, I am qualified to comment on health and well-being and on the impact of such science as this. The placing McDonald's in this location, which will entice young people on a daily basis, parents and I agree that this will impact on our future in our communities. And I think we need to object and not approve this application on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. We have Katie Edwards from the franchisee for McDonald's joining our meeting today. Katie, would you like to add any comments to that? And if you do, you have 5 minutes to speak. You'll be notified the minute when you have that left, and I'll ask Tammy to put the timer on.
Yes, that's
You can
great.
begin,
Thank you.
Katie.
Bore da, good morning. My name is Katie Edwards and I'm a franchisee consultant at McDonald's, providing guidance and support to McDonald's franchisees, including our franchisees nearby in Swansea. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you today to support the application. I wanted to use this opportunity to add some detail to the report before you and tell you a little bit more about McDonald's. Our development team has worked closely with officers throughout the application process and are pleased with the recommendations to approve the proposal. They've continually liaised and cooperated with both planning officers and the local highway authority during the application process to ensure that the proposals are in an acceptable form. Amendments have been made, as mentioned, the inclusion of the additional EV chargers, inclusion of additional cycle parking, enhanced landscaping, enhanced site layout, including widening of the existing footpath around the site to be shared with the cycleway footpath to improve active travel links. And we will use the redundant bus stop for HGV deliveries to prevent it needing to go into the car park. The latest figures show that McDonald's contributes approximately 369 million to the economy of Wales and supports around 11,000 jobs. And this restaurant would bring further long-term investment of around 120 jobs in the local economy in the short term. As a company, McDonald's invests over £62 million a year in staff training, and all employees have access to a range of qualifications to help them develop, including nationally recognised degrees and apprenticeships. Many of our restaurant managers begin their career at McDonald's working part-time, many whilst studying in college or university. And today I'm an example of someone who has built a fantastic career with McDonald's, from being a part-time employee of Morriston McDonald's at 16 years old to now being a consultant supporting franchisees who collectively run 33 restaurants. And McDonald's has allowed me to build a career and given me the training and development opportunities along the way, including putting me through hospitality apprenticeships. And we are proud to be able to provide employment opportunities that can lead to careers and opportunities for individuals to balance family or flexible working and other commitments. And we take our responsibility as a good neighbour very seriously and are committed to helping local communities tackle litter and waste. We've invested heavily in recent years, introducing government legislation-approved recycling bins across all of our Welsh restaurants, displaying clear instructions as to how to responsibly dispose and recycle waste. And we're proud to be part of the local community that we operate in. We're continually active in working to ensure that the places that we live and work in are clean and tidy as possible. All of our restaurants conduct at least 3 litter patrols every day, and many of our restaurants engage with wider teams of volunteers from restaurants to partake in litter picks of our local beauty spots. We work closely with Keep Wales Tidy to support several of their initiatives across Wales. And I just wanted to share a couple of local examples of the work that we've done in the community. So Morris McDonald's has completed numerous projects in the local community. And just to share a few, in the last year, the team volunteered at Capel Seion Newydd to complete a garden revamp of the chapel's memorial garden. Previous to this, they took part in a Love Where You Live event to support the local council to restore
1
the
minute
park
remaining.
Thank you. The park at Morriston Park. There are many benefits that the proposed scheme will bring, and we're excited to invest in the local area for the long term. Providing significant economic investment will provide a range of benefits to the local community. We're pleased with the officer's recommendation, and we trust that you can support the application. And that's all I'd like to add. So thank you for your time this morning. Diolch am eich amser.
Thank you very much, Katie, for that. We'd like to move on now, and I'd like to fetch in the local ward member to give you a presentation. Councillor Neath Jenkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Before I begin, I'd just like to correct some of the statements that have been made today. Tesco's did indeed build a footbridge across the River Tower. However, the only reason it's there is because Tesco's was built there. The footbridge that connects Alltwend to Pontardawe has been there long before Tesco's was ever built, and that footpath has existed since the closure of the chemical plant that was sited there and closed in the 1950s. Secondly, the point that the car park is underused can be directly linked to this local authority, who insisted that Tesco's provides 600 car parking spaces when they only required 250. And I'm rather alarmed by Katie's last statement of HGVs using the redundant bus stop, which seems unfeasible, as this is cited as where the pavement is going to be widened to allow active travel. So are we actually proposing that pedestrians and cyclists are battling with HGVs to be able to go to school or just move around? I've previously submitted 2 letters of objections to these proposals, and a small portion of these is included in the report. As Councillor Reynolds said, we know that a quarter of our children are starting school as overweight or obese. Levels of obesity have increased 3-fold just in 50 years. Wales, via the Welsh Government, has got a multitude of health strategies to address the impact of obesity. Healthy Weight Wales, Wellbeing of the Future Generations Act, strategic vision for maternity services in Wales, and the All Wales Obesity Pathway, of which I was the author. Medical experts in Wales have expressed their concerns about this rising epidemic. Dr Hussey, previous Chief Medical Officer of Wales, said obesity childhood can lead to a lifetime of serious health problems, including heart disease, cancer, diabetes and high blood pressure. Refusing applications for more fast food outlets in the vicinity of schools would support children to make healthier food choices. Sadly, the Welsh Government has been talking about bringing this in since 2017, and we are still waiting. Other health concerns about this proposal is air pollution. This is linked to 40,000 people a year dying prematurely. Childhood exposure to traffic-related particular air pollutants has been linked with cardiovascular disease, respiratory and neurological development issues. There's a rising awareness about the widespread risks of pollution, and guidelines recommend that schools and play areas are sited at least 150 metres from road traffic. However, this proposal states that they're going to build an outdoor play area on one of the major trunk arterial routes down the Swansea Valley. If we just look at the reports, contextual safeguarding, Many parents have raised this with me. We repeatedly see things in the newspapers about where fast food outlets lead to vulnerable people on peer-in-peer violence, and neighbourhood police in other areas where they've had drive-through and fast food restaurants. They record a significant rise in antisocial behaviour and youth-enabled violent crimes. This would put an intolerable pressure on our police services, because we don't have a police station in Pontardawe anymore, and we actually have, well, as you're aware from our meetings with the Chief Inspector, we have 1 sergeant and 3 police officers on, covering the whole of the Neath and Swansea Valley and Neath Town Centre at a night. The revised site plan indicates a new pedestrian entrance, if it exists, of course, because apparently now it's going to be a HGV loading area, and several zebra crossings within the proposed development. And whilst I recognise the pedestrian route to Cwmtawe School skirts around that, we recognise that that is not how our pupils walk, and they go directly through Tesco's car park. The addition of this new pedestrian entrance seems to be included purely with the sole intention of encouraging pedestrians to enter McDonald's directly, and because it's the shortest route to school. The dangers of negotiating 4 additional zebra crossings within McDonald's also increases the danger to the pupils. Eluned Morgan, our First Minister, was contacted about this proposal when she was Health and Social Services Minister, and her report stated that planning system contributes towards the delivery of sustainable developments and well-being objectives. Such planning decisions are based on the full examinations of all economic, environmental and social impacts, including those relating to health and childhood obesity. But we don't see a health impact for this. My final point of objection is that I believe that the application process is flawed. This proposal sits in the ward of Alltwen, a small village on the outskirts of Pontardawe. It is out of town, and I'm informed that in this case the sequential test applies, meaning that it has to show that there isn't a town centre site that could meet this identified need. In Pontardawe at the moment, we have 7 cafes, 2 bakeries, 2 chip shops, 5 Indian restaurants, 3 Chinese takeaways, 7 pubs, most of which do food, 1 dessert shop, and 3 takeaways that provide burgers, pizzas, and kebabs. So I don't see that this need is there. Then that brings me to policy R3, the out-of-centre retail.
We try and wind it down if we can, please.
Sorry, retail proposals, which states that the vitality and viability of existing retail centres will not be undermined, taking into account the cumulative effects of other approved retail developments. And the proposal is within the Valley Strategy area. As a new retail unit, a change of use or extension resulting in the premises being 200 square metres gross floor space. This is in Alltwen, it's not in a town. I can't see that this can be supported, and in my view, in consenting to this application, which is located in the heart of the community, within walking distance of Cwmtawe Community School, Alltwen Primary School, and being within 1.5 miles of 5 other primary schools in the area, it seems to be contrary to our public policy aims and would undoubtedly contribute to the growing problem of obesity and childhood obesity in particular. I really would not like to see Neath Talbot consider it appropriate to have so little regard for the health of our young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Jenkins. Before we move on, would any officers like to add anything or answer questions for that, please?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Jenkins for your comments today. In relation to obviously some of those things that you've raised, as you pointed out, Councillor Reynolds, there are, and I think obviously Katie also pointed out in her statement, litter is not just for planning to control. Clearly, we have a role to play in terms of ensuring that they have appropriate facilities on site, but it is a big issue. And as pointed out in my presentation, there is continual action to reduce packaging and waste and potential penalties on people who don't follow those rules. As you know, there's food recycling rules that have been recently brought out that impact on businesses that, again, you will notice in most stores now, they have to have their separate recycling facilities in there rather than one bin. So there's lots of changes that will take place outside in wider legislation controlled by others outside of planning control. But in terms of the planning application, we think there's sufficient, is sufficiently addressed through the conditions that we've imposed, that it would address everything that we can under the planning element. Again, in relation to health and well-being, I can't argue with the fact that certain foods are bad for you, and there's more and more information coming out all the time, and sometimes coffee's bad for you, sometimes a bit of coffee's good for you. That again is a wide society issue that is not for planning alone to consider. We have considered all of the relevant aspects in the round. As you can see from the report, there are no technical objections in relation to traffic. As pointed out by Justin, the tracking has been done in terms of the HGV parking, but again, it is a very intermittent use. I mean, it's potentially one every couple of months, where there's normal delivery routes will be on smaller vehicles, which are accommodated within the site. Currently, there is a parking bay there. It is not currently used by buses, and that's what we have to consider today, not something that may or may not happen in the future. But there is an argument to say that if people were having a local bus to the Tesco store, that potentially a facility closer to the actual store would be more appropriate. And that can be discussed with Tesco if that is a possibility in the future. I would imagine that people with their shopping wouldn't want to walk all the way down to the other end of the site, up to the petrol filling station to catch the bus. It would probably be more appropriate to have something that would stop closer to the store. But again, we only have to look at the application and the site as it exists today. In relation to antisocial behaviour, again, you know, this is a wider societal issue that we can put relevant controls in place through the planning process. But ultimately, there are certain aspects that have to be dealt with others, like the police and the wider community. And just to touch briefly on the school, which I didn't mention in the report, obviously, primary schools, the majority of pupils, if not all, would probably be escorted to and from the school by their parents. They don't walk the active travel route themselves at a young age. The school have confirmed via education yesterday that the gate to the school is they're closed at lunchtimes. The only open during school opening and closing time, so there's no access out of the school in Akka to that gate at lunchtimes. I think that, and you know, all I would say is I think that everything else has been generally covered within the report that's been raised. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. I can see Justin's got his hand up. Put you back in, Justin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Reynolds and Jenkins, for your comments, by the way. Just want to clarify on a couple of things that I've written down whilst you were speaking. The bus stop, well, in regards to active travel, the land take will be taken towards the actual building itself, so that what we class as a lay-by is not a bus stop, it is a lay-by. That won't change in terms of its dimensions, and it has been auto-tracked in accordance with that and approved accordingly. So if there are any widening to be done, the land take will be actually going into the development itself in terms of active travel. And like Chris said as well, it'll be an intermittent sort of delivery process. That the management plan will have two 2 banksmans. They'll have a GPS on the wagon to let them know in advance when they'll be turning up on site as well. The 2 banksmans will be there. There'll be a trolley taking off a lift at the back of the wagon. The wagon will be cascaded very, very quickly and briefly over a 3-metre footway or 3.5-metre footway, whichever the active travel dimensions were, I can't remember, but a couple of metres, and then it'll be in the site itself and wheeled to the appropriate location. The other point I wanted to try and make as well is with regards to the lay-by, that has never been used as a bus stop to my knowledge and any one of my colleagues since the approval of Tesco's back in 2003. So just over 20 years now there's been, and there's never been used as a bus stop at all, just used as a lay-by, and there's no traffic orders there currently at the moment that states that either. The other thing I wanted to mention was as well with Councillor Jenkins in regard to the actual parking. There's 410 car parking spaces, I believe there, not 600. And the 410 parking spaces would have been at the time when the council themselves would have asked for a minimum standard, as Chris highlighted to within his report. And I also mentioned within the opening report that the 410 car parking spaces have been well underused, but at the time of the design and the transport impact assessment, which Tesco's would have had to have provided as part of their planning process or planning application approval, would have accounted for the 410 car parking spaces and the use thereof. So the transport impact assessment back in 2003 for Tesco's would have been assessed at the time based upon the 410 car parking spaces in use. So you can clearly see from that, and hopefully that will give you a better understanding that currently the car parking spaces are well underused, and therefore, again, we offer no highway objection to the proposals here today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both for the added information. Before we move on now, I'd like to ask, is there any questions from ward members who'd like to come in and ask any questions, please?
I'd just like to refute that the bus stop was used. Tesco's used to run a free bus which went up the valleys, and I'm sure Councillor Davies could vouch for that because it used to attend her village.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Right, we'll move on to questions from committee members now. Okay.
Microphone, please, Councillor David. Yeah.
Oh, I pressed the wrong one. There was a bus shelter there. And that was, I don't know how long is it since it's been taken away, but there was definitely a bus shelter in that lay-by.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we try and find out if that's correct or not, please, Chris?
Yeah, as I said, notwithstanding that, there are no TROs in place, as Justin's pointed out. There is no currently bus provision into that area, so it's not designated as a bus stop on the ground, and there currently isn't the bus provision into the site. Clearly, if in the future a community bus service or something similar were to operate, as stated, that can be easily accommodated. As Justin said, deliveries into that through HGV are intermittent, and they can time that in terms of buses to make sure that there's no conflict in terms of any bus delivery at that point. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll fetch in Councillor Jordan now, please.
Chair, good morning. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Justin. And thank everyone.
You're on mute, Councillor Davis. Jordan, Councillor Jordan, apologies. Can't hear you. No, we can't hear you. Can I suggest that you leave the meeting and rejoin? Okay, and we will come back to you. Thank you.
Okay, I'll fetch in Councillor Heath Davis next, please.
You're on mute, Councillor Davis.
Right, okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Borda. I'm a school governor in Cwmtawe School, and I'm very concerned again the obesity of the school pupils, and also regarding the rubbish, not just in the car park, surrounding areas. My Green Valley works absolutely fantastic job in cleaning up Swansea Valley, and they work so hard. And this is a kick in the teeth for them, as in seeing so much rubbish, which will be added, people in their cars and throwing out and whatever, which does happen. And so as for the community have pointed out where Achwen, Swansea Valley, and also the last thing I will say is the traffic. I know you've done a survey, but I've been on that road many times and I've stuck there for quite a time. And other people have as well. So it's more seconds. It's been a long, long time. And if this does come in, and obviously actions will happen, and people's patience whatsoever. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Would any officers like to answer that, please?
Yeah,
Sorry, could you use your mic, Councillor Patterson, just so that everyone at home is aware of what's going on in the chamber? No.
Yes, I had difficulty understanding or hearing the speech then properly.
Thank you. If I could just remind members at home to wear their headsets, it does help a lot with sound and being able to hear you. Thank you.
thank you, Chair. I think your comments were predominantly in relation to concerns over litter and obviously traffic. As Justin has pointed out, there will be seconds impacted on the junction. This will clearly add to traffic in the junction, but there's also a significant amount of traffic that passes that side. Currently, you also have traffic that will use the petrol filling station. As I said, the road itself, as a number, runs all the way from Mumbles all the way through to Senny Bridge. Is clearly used by a lot of people for commuting up and down the valley. So there'll be a lot of traffic that would already stop off to either utilise the Tesco's. Whilst the store is located within the ward of Achwen, serves a wider catchment. So you will obviously have a lot of people travelling to that store, making a choice to shop in that store or another. So in terms of traffic, I think Justin and the report sets out, there will clearly be an impact, but it's not a significant impact that would justify any off-site highway works. So what would normally happen is that if there was an identified impact, potentially they would be looking at off-site highway improvements if possible. And that looks at junction improvements, traffic lights, etc. In this case, that the impacts are so negligible, as Justin's pointed out, there is no requirement for any off-site highway works to deal with that. That is not to say further development down the line in the future might require additional improvements that may be borne by development, but they have to be identified as a potential impact. And then obviously that would be a requirement of any planning application to deliver those off-site works. In relation to litter, again, we would just be repeating what we've already said. This is a wider societal issue that both central government and Welsh government introduce various pieces of legislation and controls. There's a constant drive for recycling and use of less packaging, and that will no doubt continue. As as McDonald's have stated, and we've stated, there will be conditions within the report requiring recycling and bins and refuse bins within the site. And we will add a note to that permission to consider whether or not there will be potential for McDonald's to also provide some bins either side in terms of the active travel route via the footbridges. However, that would be something that we'd have to consider with our waste team, because there may be an additional cost to the authority for that, but it's a condition that would require a scheme to come in as part of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. I'll fetch Justin in now before we move on.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back in regarding Councillor Heath Davis's comment. We've worked with the developer and the developer's consultants with regards to the traffic trips to and from the site. We've obviously used the baseline figures of what's currently there, and what we are saying, or what I did say in the report at the start, was giving you an idea of how many seconds in addition you would have to wait, or it would be delayed compared to now, and we are talking seconds. So on that basis, it's still within the tolerance of what we class as the 85th percentile for traffic saturation levels for that area. even at the worst peak times and the intermittent peak for the highways in and around the county roads. So on that basis, we would be unreasonable, to even consider refusing such an application with a robust survey and the data that was provided to us as a local authority, which again, going back to what I said earlier, we've rigorously looked at this, and there's been a long discussion over the highway impacts of this development going ahead, and we as a highway authority fully support it, because we got no cause or reason to otherwise. So on that basis, I would say that we still offer no highway objection, and hand it back to you then, Chair. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you both. Just to state now, I think the question on litter and traffic has been answered quite a few times now, so we won't be taking any more questions unless they're totally significant. Thank you. Can I first in Councillor Jordan now, please, and then I'll move on.
No.
We still can't hear you, Carl.
I noticed, Chair, if you don't mind, I noticed you have your headset in, Councillor Jordan, that's great, but could you try taking it out perhaps and speaking without it? Give your system... Yes, yeah.
Okay, let me just take this off then. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers, Justin, Chris, members of the public for their contributions this morning. Just a quick one. Can I just remind everyone that we're on the edge of the national park here. I know we're on about litter. We cut it in the bud. There's 3 councils impacted on this. We've got Neath, Talbot, Swansea City, and Powers Council trying to fund services to carry out litter picks, road closures to do these, etc., etc. Would it be an idea for us to write in the conditions that if a road closure is required on the A4 4067 was it, and the A474, that perhaps McDonald's contribute to part of it. Also, digital packaging, the identification will not work. As much as we try and push for vehicle registration numbers put onto these bags, etc., they're not going to work. Somebody who's doing it, recycling their packaging, putting it in the bin legally, etc., the chance of it being abused, or someone taking packaging out and discarding it, and then wrongful convictions being made for littering. Secondly, my only other concern would be the lay-by to deliver goods. Standing there last week, watching a few vehicles coming out of Tesco's, and they're looking directly across the road to vehicles coming out to the petrol station. They're not looking left to the left-hand side. Is there anything that can be done to the approach road here that make signs put up to say new road layout ahead, etc.? I know you're going to have bankspersons, I should say, put into position here, but these are the risk as well of being struck if people are looking to the right hand side or ahead, but not looking left into the new road. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, in relation to litter, I think I'd just be repeating myself. In terms of potential costs for the road, as you can see from Justin's impact, there will be traffic for McDonald's, but it's not a significant amount that would justify any off-site highway works, and it would be beyond our justification to be asking them to contribute to potential works that may be required in the future on that road, because the impacts of their traffic are negligible in terms of the impacts on the quantity of traffic within that area. In terms of the works within the site itself, as you see from the planning conditions, they require separate consents through highways legislation, through section 278 agreements, etc., TROs, but they also require the road safety audit process to go through. So as part of that, an independent person audits those works to ensure that they are acceptable in terms of highway and pedestrian safety. So there would be improvements in pedestrian vision displays. There will be signage, TRO things that will obviously set out. And, on occasion, those do require signs that say, be aware, alternative road layout ahead. But that is through that separate process, through that 278 and TRO works and the road safety audits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. If we move on now, Kathy, please.
Thanks, Chair. Right, I've got points on 3 elements of the report. The first one on page 22 concerning the town centre first approach. It references our LDP policy R3 and talks about the sequential approach. But if you look at R3, there's actually a first condition that has to be met before we even start talking about the sequential approach. And that is that it needs to be demonstrated that there is a need for the development. I don't think this application does actually demonstrate a need, given that the majority of local responses received during the consultation were against the development. And as the ward member pointed out, Pontardawe is already quite well furnished with eating establishments. I'm unconvinced that the demonstration for the need for the development has actually been made. Next point on page 28, the Environmental Health Officer recommendation is that opening hours are kept in line with the 2300 to 700 quiet hours. That's not happening. Okay, the restaurant's being closed, but the drive-through is being allowed to open for 24 hours. One of the arguments given for that is that Tesco and the petrol station are open 24 hours. They're not. Certainly, there may. I don't know what the licensing or whatever is, but certainly currently Tesco and the petrol station are open 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday to Saturday. Final point on traffic. I know we've said that this has been comprehensively covered, but there were a couple of points raised in the initial highways objection, which I can't see have been addressed. So I just want to confirm that they have been. We've been reassured that highways are happy with it, and I just wanted to confirm on a couple of points. In the original objection, highways asked for a 10-year growth factor to be put into the traffic modelling, and actually in the scoping document for the modelling, it did say that scenarios up to 2033 would be modelled. But in what we've been given in the reports and the results, we've only got results for 2024. So I was just querying that. The second point is on deliveries. Do we know if the restaurant is going to offer a delivery service through Uber Eats, Deliveroo, whatever? In 2019, 10% of McDonald's orders were via delivery, and I'm sure it's expanded considerably since then. And obviously, if deliveries are being offered, that's got a traffic implication. So I just wondered if that had been explored. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James. I got Justin on. I'll fetch you on first, Justin, and then if Chris wants to come in. And
Okay, thanks, Chair. If I can go back to Councillor Ros Davis's comment when she said there was a bus stop there, I've just checked, and there was, so apologies, there was one there back in 2006, but for obvious reasons of not being used, it was removed on that basis. So I just wanted to come back with that comment. In regard to the original submission for McDonald's, Councillor James, thank you for your comments, by the way. We did have a look at that. We had a chat with the consultancy. We normally ask for a growth factor within that, but the VISM approach which they used is so detailed in terms of the account of cultural and the use of existing traffic to and from each arm. There was detailed enough that would satisfy us that using the baseline figures and the post-development figures would be sufficient enough for us. The growth factors are not something which are statutory. It is something that the local highway authorities can ask for. The projection, there's no guidance out there to state within the Department for Transport that we need to do it a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year. It is down to the discretion of the local authority. And as a highway authority, we were more than satisfied with the data that's been provided. As I said in the first initial sort of presentation, the amount of surveys that were undertaken were very detailed. They were done in a neutral month, and therefore we were more than satisfied, and we could not fail to support the evidence that was presented to us as a local highway authority. And hopefully that answers your question there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Justin. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the hours of operation, obviously you've seen the condition that we're proposing within the report. We're proposing that the restaurant itself closes, is only open between 7 AM and 11 PM, with the drive-through allowing to be operated 24-hour. If members were minded to consider a alternative condition that they felt that was more appropriate, then that could be considered by members as part of their consideration. However, we think taking into account the fact that there's existing development within that area in terms of the food store and the petrol filling station that have no controls over opening hours, we felt that it would be onerous on us to impose significant restrictions in terms of that operation overnight for the drive-through element alone. I think in relation to the issue regarding policy R3, I'll bring in my colleague Claire to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, just on the policy R3 issue, thanks for the comments on regards the need. It's a slightly difficult one because the policy R3 in its entirety is aimed at primarily retail development, and it's looking for the need in terms of established policies on convenience goods and that sort of thing. So when Tesco's was first built, for example, because this is not strictly a retail application, it's a hot food takeaway restaurant. We've applied the policy in the whole rather than individual elements which are more applicable to the retail element of planning policy. So that's why, for example, it's been had to be demonstrated whether there's no sequentially preferable sites for the proposal within the town centre, and that's been demonstrated. But also going on to the criteria for there's a presumption in favour of new units in Valley Strategy area up to a certain size. Whilst this is over the 200 metre squared referred to in the policy, when you look at the policy in the whole, we haven't applied a stringent needs test to every individual element because it's not actually, strictly speaking, a retail proposal. It's a drive-through restaurant, a food takeaway rather than a retail per se. Hope that helps.
And just to add, obviously, as pointed out by the local member and others, there is a lot of restaurants and other associated uses within the town centre, which would obviously be supporting uses to existing town centres. We're seeing this happening across the country, where retail centres are changing in the way that they form. Clearly, that shows there is a big demand for them if it can keep that number of hot food takeaways and restaurants available. We cannot consider competition as part of planning. The fact that there may be 2, 3, 4 uses of a similar type within the town centre, whether that be selling the same goods or a competitive issue in terms of cafes and other facilities. It's about providing that range of choice. So I think in terms of any objection on the grounds that there's already enough of that type of development in the area, we would have difficulty in supporting a recommendation of refusal on that basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, officers. There was one other question on deliveries. I don't know if we can answer this. Katie, would you be able to answer that for us, please?
I can step in, Chair. Sorry, I'm Ben Fox. I'm the agent. Yeah, it would operate in any normal situation as per any local store, any other takeaway, any other. I mean, Uber Eats and things are expanding to. You can get a Boots via delivery now, so it would operate in any normal way.
Thank you. And obviously, what you have to understand on this application is we have got controls in terms of a delivery management plan. I would imagine that quite a few of the stores that are currently within the town centre don't have any delivery management plans in place. And what you see in town centres is HGVs and other vehicles double parking in our high streets. I have to negotiate many on my way home and into work every morning as I travel through my stake, but luckily that's in Bridgend, so we don't have to worry about that. But this will have a delivery management plan, and thereby it will be approved by a condition. And as part of that condition, it is enforceable through planning. So obviously, if the applicants are found not to be complying with those conditions, we have an ability to, rein them in and to get them to comply in terms of what's being put forward. And that is in conjunction with obviously the road safety audit and everything else that we undertaken as part of those on-site highway works. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think it was a misunderstanding, but I think the question was on deliveries of food by Uber, that type of thing. Am I correct on that, Kathy?
Yeah, there would be no ability for us to restrict that type of facility. It is part of modern society. It is a way that potentially, you could argue whether that's a more sustainable way of having food delivered or not. It is part of what the stores do. And I think touching on something the councillor said earlier, with things like the marking of packaging with registration numbers, these are things that will come in outside of planning control, really. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Kathy, I'll get you back in again, please.
Yeah, thanks. My point about delivery wasn't to object to it or anything. It was the fact, obviously, delivery generates more vehicle movements, and I wondered if that had been built into the traffic model, given that we're looking at 10% plus of an increase. I just wondered if that had been taken into account.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on that, with regards to deliveries, the delivery driver would more than likely undertake a delivery for multiple homes, which then negates them from actually accessing the site. So really speaking, there should be less traffic if you look at it in that context, because if you've got a delivery driver who's going to be dropping off to maybe 3 or 4 dwellings, those 3 or 4 dwellings are not turning up on site to the actual McDonald's. So there could be a net sort of a gain there in terms of less traffic coming to and from the site. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Councillor Thomas?
Thank you. So I've got a few points to make. I'll do them one at a time if that's all right. So first of all, we keep talking about town centres and we keep talking about the Valley growth strategy growth area and stuff, but this isn't in the Valley strategy growth area. It's not in a town centre. It's an Ashtwen, and I think that needs to be taken on board. And policy R3 applies because it's an Ashtwen. It's not in that area. And the second part of that policy doesn't apply because it's not in a Valley strategy growth area. But I'm going to start with so in the papers there was mention of that just before we went on to the traffic modelling, they said that the significant number of the trips would actually be existing trips to the area, and I'm wondering if the modelling was built on that basis, because I don't think McDonald's would want to build here if they weren't going to get customers explicitly going to McDonald's. So could we have a bit more detail on that, please?
I come in, Chair?
I'm going to allow this to be answered this time now, and then I'm not going to take any more questions on traffic and litter. I think it's been covered enough now this morning. So, Justin, if you can just answer this question, and then we'll call it a day on traffic and litter, please.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Thomas, for your comment. Again, going back to the start of this meeting, I explained that the survey itself, the baseline figures, would have been interpolated on the fact that the existing traffic that is using the county roads, and of course that is going in and out of Tesco. So all the survey would have covered both roundabouts externally outside of Tesco's and the mini roundabout within the site as well. On that basis, you've got to use that as a baseline to go forward with projections that were standard projections for this type of development, which Ben and his team, along with Katie, would have projection figures for the use of such a development like this, and also under the tricks package, which we refer to as well, which anybody can sort of access to if you've got the relevant password. You can utilize that, and that'll give you an idea of what the percentage of traffic trips would be used for a development such as this. That then gets factored into the modelling of this. and then it projected, calculations are projected then to show the impact and the potential delays on each arm coming to each of the roundabouts effectively. So that's how it's done in a very, very quick synopsis. And like I said previously in my other comments, the surveys that have been undertaken have been within a neutral month, and we've explained what they are. And the fact that it's come back with the undersaturation levels, we would be unreasonable as a local authority to refuse it on those grounds. Hopefully that's answered your question, Councillor Thomas, but effectively the baseline figures would be, because you've got to start somewhere, would be looking at the neutral month. So we're trying to get as much traffic encapsulated within the surveys as we can. And then on that basis, then the modelling will be undertaken from that point. So thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Justin. No. Right, I got one more in the chamber, Councillor Davis.
Sorry,
and then
I've got more.
Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, I
sorry,
had
Councillor
several
Thomas.
points to go through. I want to do them one at a time, otherwise I have ADHD.
Right,
I get confused.
Councillor Thomas, can you ask the questions and then we'll answer them at the end, please?
I need to do them one at a time. Sorry, otherwise I'll miss points. So my next point is about the noise survey, and I don't think it's taken into effect the amplifying effect of the valley walls. My partner lives in Aftwen. He lives higher up the mountain, and it's really loud there. Even with just kids like congregating in this car park, you can hear it on a Friday night and a Saturday night. It's very loud. The survey points were very low lying, and obviously there's shrubbery and trees and stuff to get in the way of the sound as a sound buffer there. And I'm wondering whether we could have some comments on that, please.
Yeah, as stated, environmental health and consulted as part of the application. We've considered the potential impacts of it, and we've put suitable controls in that we believe would control activity down to a level that would be acceptable. As stated, if members wish to consider alternative opening hours, because they felt that would address a number of concerns that have been raised, that is within their gift to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, my next point is really in response to Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Jenkins' points. So under the Wellbeing Future Generations Act, there are actually wellbeing goals, and that does include health. So I'd like to suggest that we do a health impact assessment on this. I notice it was mentioned in the previous papers, but it's been removed from these ones.
Yeah, there is no statutory requirement as part of the validation of this type of application to require one of those. As stated, there is no doubt that there are health and wellbeing goals within, there's comments in Future Wales and there's comments within obviously the Act itself. However, these are overarching, wider things about societal issues, not just about planning. As I've stated, I do understand those issues. I think all officers understand that certain things are good for you and certain things are bad for you, but it's a matter of choice. And there are no policies within the local plan that would allow us or any justification or evidence that this particular development in itself would result in such an impact that would justify refusal. That is not to say some people may never wish to go to this type of development, but it is a free choice that people are allowed to make, and we have to have reasonable planning grounds and justifications to refuse an application on that. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thanks for that, but I think even though it doesn't meet the minimum requirement for a statutory health impact assessment, I think we can still do one if we want to, though, can't we?
No, we got nothing else to add on to that there, Cathy. If you'd like to take that up with officers outside the meeting, then Sarah, sorry, then yeah, we can do that.
Okay. So my next point is sorry, I've lost my place. So the statutory 106 donation, it's been waived in this instance, and I wasn't really clear on why. It seems to be saying that we can't do it under legislation. Could you explain that, please, Chris?
Our supplementary planning guidance is quite clear and sets out what we ask for Section 106 agreement. It's not that it's waived. We're not allowing them to get away without paying Section 106 agreements. There is no requirement for them to pay a Section 106 agreement. As pointed out, the active travel improvements will be undertaken as part of the development at their cost, and that will provide a a betterment in terms of the development for that active travel route that will put it to the 3.2 metre standard for that development. As I touched on earlier, off-site highway works can be as part of a Section 106 agreement, and contributions that a developer could do as part of a betterment, but there is no justification to ask for those, as the impacts identified within the traffic statements are showing that there will not be an increase that would justify any works. So there will be some improvements on the edges of the site in terms of visibility displays and the active travel route, but there is no justification based on our policy and the supplementary planning guidance to be asking them for any contribution for any other off-site works that would be required. So if you look at the SPG, there's things like affordable housing. Those are restricted purely to housing developments. You've got open space and play. Again, those are predominantly from housing developments. You also have some contributions that relate to other types of developments, but there is no justification for us to be asking for a financial contribution for this application. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thomas, how many more questions have you got to ask, please?
I've got one more. So this
Okay,
brings me
thank
on
you.
to the point now about the policy R3. So in the papers, while it was explained that that doesn't apply because it's not a retail development, later on in the papers you describe it as a quasi-retail development, and you go on to say that buildings are primarily for retail use, and then later on you reference policy R3 as a reason for supporting the development. So I'd really like some clarity on that, please, because I feel that if policy R3 is being referenced, then it does apply, and I don't think we meet the terms of that policy for this development.
Thank you, Chair. The reference I think it makes to it is that the actual site itself, the wider site in terms of the Tesco store, the car park, and the petrol filling station as a quasi-retail park is what it calls it. You will see that there's lots of these sites. We've got them in there's sites in Aberavon and various other places. You'll see most large stores now, because of this drive to active travel and this general lack of need for such large car parking spaces, as pointed out by the local member. Previously, no one had a choice. Everyone drove. We're trying to get people out of their cars. So obviously these sites now, large portions of these sites are becoming redundant. As was pointed out on the site visit, the site is open 24 hours. People can drive in there now and park up, and they can access the ATMs on Tesco's. There is no barrier system in place. However, Tesco in the future could determine they want to prevent access onto their land and put a barrier in. That would be for them to do. But in terms of policy R3, it is a good guide for us to look at in terms of what we've assessed in terms of development. It is not retail. It is it is in a use class of its own. It's A3, not A1. A1 is retail, but most town centres include some form of A1, A2, and A3 as supporting uses. So this would be a supporting use to retail. So in terms of how we've looked at it, in terms of, as I pointed out earlier, you cannot disaggregate these uses out and have a McDonald's that could walk in tomorrow and open up in one of the A3 uses in Pontardawe Town Centre with no requirement for planning permission, and separate the drive-through element off as a separate thing. If what they want to put forward is a restaurant and drive-through, we have to look at that as one piece. We then have to look at, can that be accommodated? And we've looked at then, can that be accommodated within the existing confines of the district centre of Pontardawe, which it cannot be. They've looked at alternative sites, and there are alternative sites, however, they're less attractive in terms of sustainability, and potentially they would encourage traffic to a destination that they currently don't do now. And another site that is potentially available as an actual housing allocation, which again would encourage traffic into an area that would probably not be able to cope with that traffic. So in terms of the general policy of R3, there's parts of it that are relevant, but it is predominantly a policy that relates to retail development. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I come back in on that? So I mean, you keep talking about the town centre of Pontardawe. It's not in Pontardawe, it's in Aftwen. So which
Councillor
is why
Thomas, I'll allow you to come back this time, and then we're moving on. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Aftwen is a ward, and there's a man-made boundary that goes round that ward, and ward boundaries change. Tesco's, for example, if you were to ask people where Tesco's was, some people may say it's in Actwen, some people say it's Tesco's Pontardawe. Everyone has always referred it to me as Tesco's Pontardawe, but that serves a catchment, just as Pontardawe district centre is a catchment and serves people from a wider area. So in terms of where it is, we're looking at it in terms of the proximity to the nearest centre and how that would be. If you wanted us to look at it in a way of Actwen, I believe, does not have a defined retail centre, and as such, we're looking at what centres are protected, and Pontardawe is the only protected centre defined within the local development plan in that area as a district centre. So it is relevant for us to consider what impacts it would have on that, and sequentially, how the proximity and how the site operates. Ultimately, when Tesco's was granted planning permission, they had to do a retail impact assessment to assess what impacts that could have, which resulted in that development getting approval. It is now an established quasi-retail park, and thereby other forms of development that would be associated with that potentially may be acceptable. And I think that's into our interpretation in terms of the way that it's been assessed in terms of both sequentially and the impacts then that it would have on the surrounding area. So I think this issue about whether it's in Actwen or Pontardawe, it is clearly something that will attract people both passing through the area and within the local area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to move on now. We've got two in the chamber. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, regarding environmental health, it states that the filling station and Tesco's are open 24 hours, which is not correct. The station closes at 11 o'clock and Tesco closes at 12 o'clock, apparently.
No, in terms of the what we're saying is that there are no restrictions in place that actually under planning would require them to close. So if Tesco's wish to open 24 hours or the petrol station wish to open 24 hours, they could do so. In terms of our view, we obviously get all of the consultation responses, and we have to consider then in the round what is acceptable and what we think is appropriate for this development. So we, as I stated, we've suggested that the conditions put forward would address the impacts of the development to an acceptable level. If members were minded to consider that they don't believe that having the drive-through operating 24-hour was acceptable and they wish to put forward an alternative condition for the hours of operation, they can do so as part of an alternative recommendation should they wish to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Ross.
No, regarding noise, antisocial behaviour and all that thing, the ones who would suffer mostly are the ones who are actually living above in Actwen. Now, they're going to be having noise 24 hours a day and air pollution for most of the time and light pollution through the night.
Yeah, as I said, all our reasoning is set out within the report. I mean, clearly there's a major route that runs adjacent to this site. There's already lighting within that area. As you know, as with anything, we have specific controls under planning. But as we've seen, there is also statutory noise nuisance, which is covered by environmental health legislation, which is separate to that. So just because something may be compliant in terms of planning doesn't mean that it may result in a statutory nuisance. Going back to this issue regarding the car park, currently it appears the car park is open for use now with no other activities operating within there, and a site that is operating that has a visual can cast its eye over what's going on in that car park, potentially could be argued to be a betterment in terms of overlooking and policing, because if there were activities that were unacceptable, you have someone there who's able to deal with that and to draw attention to it. You know, there is no doubt that there will be activity associated with this development, but in balancing that in the round with all the other planning issues, as set out in the report, we don't believe that that is a justification for a recommendation of refusal in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to fetch a last member there now, Councillor Patson. Unless there's any significant question to the application, we'll be moving on to the recommendation after this member. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened intensely to all the arguments put forward by members of the committee and members who are not members of this committee. I would just like to ask a question, Chris, about there's no doubt at all that there is an obesity epidemic in this country. You know, nobody would argue that. But how much of, where do we make a start? Is it planning that has to bear the brunt of sort of saying, right, we can't have any developments now that would incorporate fast food or things like that? I mean, is it down to the planning department?
I mean, I think as it's been made clear during this conversation, it is a wide issue in terms of society is a constant evolving thing. And I think that, you know, there's much more education given to children within schools now about you know, the benefits of healthy eating and exercise, just as other things that weren't even talked about when we were in school. So there's a constantly evolving raft of legislation and controls that people are putting in, just as the same, I suppose, if you look at energy and sustainability, there's constantly evolving building control to make buildings more sustainable, to make them use less energy, more of a drive to green energy. You know, we wouldn't be, you know, sitting here approving brand new coal mines, etc. I mean, society moves on. I mean, we have a part to play, but so do parents of children, and so do the teachers within the school and the wider society. But I think, you know, it's as part of the local development plan process. You know, if these things, as they emerge through central government and through the, you know, Future Wales and evolution of planning policy Wales, it may well be that, you know, there is a policy in the plan, a general overarching one about health, but it doesn't refer to developments themselves. It's more of impacts of developments on wider issues. But if members feel that this is something that they want to include within the emerging local development plan going forward, it may well be something that is then included within that. I think we've had this discussion with HMOs, for example, but there are currently no policies within there or no zones within the plan where there's specific controls about HMOs. But what you have to do is to get those policies within the plan, you've got to identify the harm. You can't say we think something might happen. And I think to try and put all of that onto one planning application when clearly it's a bigger societal issue is a quite difficult thing to do. But I do understand that it's a very emotive topic, but it's very difficult to do based on facts and evidence on one planning application and one user.
And obviously, you will have taken all of our policies into account when coming to your recommendation on this application. So I'm trying to say that if any member were to think, oh, I just don't want this and I'm going to vote against it, for whatever reason, sound reasons in people's minds, but maybe not planning grounds, what would you know, if we went against something like this, what would be the possibility of it being overturned?
I don't really.
By inspectors,
yeah.
you know.
I mean, I can't comment on what may or may not happen. I'd probably ask someone from legal to comment on that, to be honest. But you are correct. If we were to refuse an application, if we were sitting here looking at an application that we had in front of you to refuse, for example, we would have to set out exactly under what policies of our plan that we would be refusing that application on. And that's what we put forward. If you look at any decision notice, there's a recommendation of refusal, it always sets out the policies. Even if you look at our conditions that we've got on there, we are obliged to refer to the policy that requires that condition, because as I've touched on earlier, if members were minded to say, right, we want to approve it, but we want it closed at all closed at a certain time, you have to refer to a policy, because the applicants can appeal that condition. So they have a right to appeal a decision if it's refused, but they also have a right to appeal a condition as well. So they can apply to vary it, and then they can apply to appeal that condition. And we would have to provide evidence to show why we think that that would be unacceptable, just as any other appeal. But in terms of that, I don't know whether or not anyone from legal wanted to come in on that point.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Councillor. Very good question. I've got to be quite diplomatic in my answer here because the Court of Appeal has given very clear guidance on this. The cases are East, Barboat versus Barbara in 2019. It effectively said, if you can just find it here, the Court of Appeal held that the risks of costs, if, for argument's sake, any matter was to go to an appeal and the local authority were to lose an appeal, that the risk of costs should encourage members to think carefully about any refusal decision. That's not to say that members should refuse it simply because they're worried about an appeal or anything like that. That's not what Lord Justice Underhill said in that case. Something, again, another matter, just I know this is probably boring case law, but it is probably quite important. There's a case called Miles versus Tonbridge in 2020. And in that case, the High Court held that whilst costs, potential costs and reputational harm were not material considerations to think of for a committee, there was nothing wrong with officers certainly giving members advice on potential costs and reputational matters, probably potential reputational harm, obviously, if any matter was to be rejected and then it was to be successfully appealed by the applicant.
Thank you.
It's a tricky area though, Councillor.
If I may just carry on a little while. My thoughts are not regarding costs, although that would probably be there or thereabouts. It would be more like if we were to lose the appeal, we would have this anyway because they would make sure that.
Can I ask you to keep it to the application if we can, please? Not so much on the legal implications.
I mean, I think just for clarification, we are putting forward a recommendation of approval subject to conditions. If an application is refused, it has to have a reason for refusal. That reason has to be set out quite clearly on, and as officers, we would, and if that application was refused with a reason based on, as I said, material planning grounds or plan policy, we as officers would obviously defend that decision of the committee at appeal. So whether that is through written representations, informal hearing, etc., that is the decision of the council that is made. And my officers and ourselves, we will defend that decision as if it is our own. So that is what we would have to do. Clearly, an inspector can look at everything. He does not have to accept the conditions that we would, in the circumstances of a refusal, for example, as part of that appeal process, they would ask us for suggested conditions. So we would be suggesting conditions to them. That is not to say they would accept those conditions, and they could impose their own conditions, which could be significantly different. And obviously, ultimately, if that is the decision and they get the conditions that the inspector considers to be relevant, you know, there's further challenge to that decision in due course. But I mean, it is out of our hands then in terms of what is imposed on it.
Yeah. And I would say, Chair, that when you come to a decision as a member of this committee, that is in your head. So I was asking questions to sort of try and balance the view of, do we accept the officer recommendation, or like some members may not want to do that. So I just wanted to get it through to my head that it is something to be considered. And that's why I asked the question. Based on the fact that how you've answered, and the schools issue, they would be shut. Access to the site would be shut at lunchtime, and that the other primary schools in the area are of significant difference away, and not to be taken into account straight away. Now that the parents may pick them up from school and then take them, but for the schools themselves, they're not going to have access to this, and it is a matter of choice. You've said that. I've managed to become considerably obese, and I don't go to a single McDonald's ever. I think it would be hard for anybody to pin down why somebody is obese and just say, well, it's because of fast food. I think it is a vastly more societal issue, and on this occasion, I'm quite happy to go with officer recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. And as I stated, if this is something that either comes from Welsh Government in the future, it will be addressed within our local development plan. If members who are on those topic bases find this is something that they want to look at in terms of not just proximity to school, but other things, it's a big issue. It's not something that is just related to schools. It can be related to lots of things. But also we've got people's access to services and things. You mentioned buses. Bus services significantly dropped away, so that contradicts active travel. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I think, as you said, it's a bigger issue. As part of the LDP, if some of these things that have come out of committee, as we always say with other issues that have come up, where we say there is a policy gap in terms of the current LDP going forward, that is something that you can take up with the policy team going forward. In terms of what we've done in terms of my officer's research, because they've researched into this far and wide, even local authorities that have policies that specifically say not this type of development within proximity to schools, it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of how that then comes out in terms of appeals, because again, it's all about the individual nature of the application and identifying the harm and the impacts. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, if I could fetch Kerry Morris in first, please, and then I fetch you in, Phil, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a brief intervention from me. Firstly, I just wanted to pay tribute to the officers' presentations this morning. They've been excellent, both in terms of the presentation slides and particularly the detailed answers that have been given both in the chamber and colleagues on the call remote. I think it's important for me to emphasise that the report before members today, and indeed all reports that come forward to members, are always comprehensive and detailed and balanced assessments of the proposals that come forward. You've heard officers, confirm and clarify this morning that, the basis of those assessments are on the policy framework, whether that be the national plan or indeed the local plan. Material considerations come into the equation, and of course representations received. What's clear is that personal preference does not come into the equation, does not come into the assessment. Each and every report, members will be aware, of course, carries with it a recommendation, whether that would be approval subject to conditions, or indeed refusal. And ultimately, it is, of course, a democratic process, and ultimately it is for members to determine whether they wish to either go with the officer recommendation or indeed go against the officer recommendation. But it's important to reiterate that if members do determine to go against recommendation in this particular case, they would have to be based on planning reasons for doing so. So I think that's an important message, Chair, for members before you move to recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. I'll fetch in Councillor Rogers now, and then I'll fetch in the ward member, Nia Jenkins, to close it then, please.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the argument this morning, I think it's clear that, a lot of people are worried about the lateness opening of the drive-through. Following Chris's advice, would it be possible to put an amendment to the recommendation so that we do limit how long the restaurant's open till? Are we able to do that? So in other words, the restaurant shuts and the drive-through shuts at 11 rather than go 24 hours.
There is nothing preventing you putting forward that. Obviously, someone would have to move that. We can offer you advice in terms of that, in terms of what we think. I mean, clearly, as you just need to be aware that they can appeal that condition, and an inspector could turn around and consider that, well, actually, I don't have a problem with the whole thing opening 24 hours. So he can put whatever condition he imposes. However, if that is what members would think would address some of the concerns that have been raised, then that is a valid alternative recommendation to put forward. As I say, currently the condition restricts the opening hours of the restaurant to 7 to 11 and 24 hours for the drive-through. That doesn't mean that you need to put forward that it's 7 to 11. You could consider something bigger for the whole thing, or you could say that 7 to 11 for the whole development. But again, you would have to explain your justification for that with a reason why you think that condition is necessary to make this development acceptable.
Okay, Chris, I think the main objection is obviously antisocial behaviour late on at night, and noise pollution during the early hours and things like that. So that would be my reasons for it, and I think I'd stick with the normal hours of 7 till 11, and I think that would be fair enough. When you look at fish and chip shops and things of a similar nature, they tend to shut about 11 o'clock as well, so it fits in line with what most other businesses run as well. Would it be possible for me to propose that then, please?
Yeah, that's fine. Could we have a seconder on that?
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, can we take a vote on that then, please?
Okay, so
Recommendation approved.
it's a recommendation, sorry, Chair, just with your indulgence, it's a recommendation of approval with the conditions, amended conditions. We're just going to bear with us, members. We'll just write this down and I'll read it out now. Thank you.
Sorry, can I clarify? I was willing to recommend a condition, not approval with a condition.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Thomas, there has been an amendment proposed by Councillor Phil Rogers, which you seconded. So we're just going to work on the wording of that and confirm it with you all now. Thank you.
So what you're proposing is recommendation of approval, subject to conditions, but with an amended condition 20 regarding opening hours, so that the opening hours for the entire development be restricted to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week.
That's correct, Chris.
No, sorry.
Yeah, can we have a seconder on that, please?
Yeah, I'll
Councillor Davis?
second.
Second that, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Davis. Okay, we've had a seconder. Can we now take a vote on it, please? Tammy, could you please ask each member if they have been present for the whole of this item and how they wish to vote, and could you then confirm the decision, please?
Thank you, Chair, certainly. So once again, you're voting for approval with the condition as detailed by the planning officer. Okay, I'm going to take each member alphabetically. I'm asking, have you been present for the whole of this item and how do you wish to vote? Starting with Councillor Anne Harrod-Aubrey, please.
Tammy, is this for the amendment? Because I don't support any amendment coming forward now because I was going to go with the officer's recommendation. I don't feel it necessary to change
sorry,
that.
Councillor Aubrey, I'll just interrupt you there. Yes, you're correct. This is for the recommendation with the amendment. If you don't want the amendment, then vote against it. If the amendment falls, then we go back to the original recommendation. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. So this is the recommendation with amendment. Councillor Aubrey, have you been present for the whole of this item and how do you wish to vote?
Yes, and I disagree with the amendment.
So you're against the proposal with the amendment, yeah?
With the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks. Chair, Councillor Tim Bowen, have you been present for the whole of this item and how do you wish to vote?
I have, I'm for.
Thank you. Same questions, Councillor Heath Davis, please.
Yeah, can I clarify, Tammy? A bit confusing this. What am I voting for now? Is for the amendment or for all of it?
You were voting to approve the recommendation with the amendment as described by the planning officer. Would you like him to explain it again? Anybody for clarity?
Right. For clarity, the recommendation, the vote is being put forward with an application, with it to be approve the application, but with an amended condition 20, which then will amend the opening hours for the whole development to 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. So ultimately, if the vote is successful, the application will be approved, but subject to that amended condition on opening hours only. So obviously, if you wish to go against that, you would vote against this recommendation, and then we will go back to the fallback position, which is the recommendation as set out in the papers. Thank you.
Okay. It's a no for me.
Just members, Councillor Davis, bear with us a second. Thank you.
If I could just come in, please, Chair. This vote is to make this proposal by Councillor Rogers the substantive motion. Okay, so you're all going to vote now on whether you want this to be the new motion. So we will all vote on this now. Councillor Jenkins will then have an opportunity to sum up as she wishes to, and then you will, if this is passed, you will then get your opportunity to finally vote on this motion. Yes or no to the amended proposal, or if this fails, then we go back to the original recommendation. Okay, so you are voting on whether this amendment becomes the main substantive motion and we forget about the old one. Is that clear? Is anybody confused and would like to ask any questions for any further clarity on that? Councillor Jordan.
Take your headset off, please, Councillor Jordan. Out of the... Thank you.
Right. No problems. Tammy, I'm a little bit confused. So are we voting against Councillor Rogers' recommendation of opening hours of 7 till 11, or voting for it or against it? We've got to take into account a lot of commuting traffic. You know, the ease of McDonald's for a lot of people is.
If we could all just take 2 minutes, and the legal officers will explain what we're actually going to vote on, and then we'll take it from there.
So what you are voting on is whether you want the proposal that is being put forward by Councillor Rogers for the condition to be changed to the drive-through also closing at 11 o'clock to become the main motion that this committee considers. You can't just... At the moment, what you've got in front of you is the office's original recommendation. If you want to do an alternative and put that forward, you need to vote to make that the alternative one. You can't just put one forward. It's got to be voted and brought onto the table. So that is what you're voting on now, is to whether or not you wish for Councillor Rogers' proposal to amend the condition to be brought onto the table. Is that okay? Does anybody else want to go through that again before you vote? Councillor Thomas, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah,
do you want to
thanks.
further
Can you just
clarification?
clarify? Because when they read the proposal, they said it was to approve the whole thing with that amendment. Can you clarify that, please?
It's not. You're not actually voting on the application now. No. You are voting on bringing that onto the table, that alternative. Once you bring it onto the table, then we can all vote on that. But it needs to be brought onto the table before you can vote on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
At the moment, it's not officially in front of you to vote on. So this is to officially bring it into the voting domain, and then you will get to vote on it. So you can, you could vote for bringing it onto the table, and then when we do the final vote, you can go against it if you still don't want to go with the recommendation of the actual thing. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, members. Since we've had clarification on that now, we're going to start the voting process again on that one. So I'll pass you over to Tammy.
Thank you, Chair. So based on the legal officer's explanation, okay, I'll go through you all alphabetically again. I'm asking, have you been present for the whole of this item, and how do you wish to vote? Councillor Anne Harrod-Aubrey, please.
Against.
Thank you. Chair, Councillor Tim Bowen, please.
Yes, I've been here. I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Heath Davis.
Yes, I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Rosalind Davis.
For the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Cathy James.
Yes, I've been present for the whole item and I vote in favour of the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Jordan. Councillor Jordan, you probably need to remove your headset from the machine and you're on mute.
Something's playing up. Yeah, I've been present for the whole item, Tammy, and I've wished to vote against.
Thank you. Councillor Suzanne Patterson, please, have you been present for the whole of the
Here for the
item?
whole item, and I vote against.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Rogers, please.
I've been here for the whole meeting, Tammy, and I'm for.
Thank you. And Councillor Sarah Thomas, please.
I've been here for the whole meeting and I'm for.
Thank you. Just to check, I haven't missed any voting members of the committee who were present. No. Therefore, that amendment is carried. Okay, we will now vote on that. Oh, bear with.
Thank you for that, members. I'm just going to pass you over now to the ward member, and when she's finished, then we'll be doing the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for leaving me to speak again. I've got to be honest, I've been quite alarmed at some of the inaccuracies that have been voiced here today. Not just the ones that I discussed earlier, but saying that obesity, people don't know why people are overweight. I was a specialist nurse in that area for 20 years, and I can assure people it's exceptionally well researched. As far as the school being closed at lunchtime in Cwm Tower, they still have to walk past McDonald's every morning and every evening on the way to and from school. And just to correct, Alltwen School is actually within 400 yards of that as well. And there is a safe route. So yes, pupils under 11 years old will be walking there. They do not need parental guidance. Personally, I think this laughs in the face of the regulations with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. And we are aware that the Senedd are in the process of developing regulations under the Public Health Wales Act 2017, which will require public bodies to carry out health impact assessments. And I think it would be highly embarrassing for Neath Talbot Council to be agreeing a fast food outlet mere months before the Senedd actually planned a rule against them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Jenkins. We now move on to the recommendation. Oh, sorry, Councillor Patson.
Just wanted to explain what I meant by that when I said that. It wasn't that we don't know the cause, but that we can't pinpoint the cause to any particular type of food. Thank you.
Okay, if we can draw that to a conclusion, please. And we'll now move on to the recommendation, which is on page 34 of the report. And again, this application stated as for approval. Subject to the amended condition. Could I have a proposer and a seconder to consider the recommendation, please?
I'm happy to propose, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Tammy, could you please now ask each member if they have been present for the whole of this item and now they wish to vote? And could you then confirm the decision, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, certainly. So, members, have you been present for the whole of this item and how do you wish to vote? Starting with Councillor Anara Daubrey, please.
Hi, Tammy. I've been present, but I'm against it now because I can't support the amendment for the condition. I don't think that's necessary, given the location and the application.
Thanks, Councillor Aubrey. Same questions to Councillor Tim Bowen. Chair, please.
Yes, I've been present and for.
Thank you. Same questions, Councillor Heath Davis, please.
I've been present and against.
Councillor Davis, I'm afraid you're going to have to repeat that. The sound our end is very poor.
I've been present and against.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Rosalind Davis, please. Have you been present for the whole of the meeting and how do you wish to vote?
I have, and I'm for the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Cathy James, please.
I've been present and I'm against the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Carl Jordan, please.
I vote for.
And have you been present for the whole of the meeting?
I have been present for all the meeting, Tammy.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Suzanne Patterson, please.
I have been here, Tammy, and I'll vote for.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Rogers.
I've been here for the whole meeting, Tammy, and I vote for.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Thomas, please.
I've been present for the whole meeting and I oppose the recommendation.
Thank you. We were 9 voting members of the committee, Chair. 5 have voted for, including the amended recommendation. 4 have voted against. Therefore, that application has been approved. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to thank all members and thank all the officers for the reports today and the attendance. And now we're going to move on to section B, matters for information. Agenda item 6, delegated decisions. As chair, I can confirm that we note the information contained within this report. Agenda item 7, urgent items. I can confirm we have no urgent items today, and I'd like to close this meeting and thank everybody for their attendance. Thank you very much.